So hello and welcome to yet another episode of TopTenz. I'm your interim host, Karl Smallwood, and today we're talking about 10 amazing things that were bought for a single dollar. And like with all the videos here on TopTenz, this one is based on a script submitted to us by a member of our writing team. The member of the writing team today being Ian40. Follow them on the social media links below if you are so inclined. And while you're down there, clicking on things, why not click the like button and the subscribe button or leave a comment with feedback or suggestions? You might be thinking, why wouldn't you ask that at the end of the video? Well, analytics show that me asking this earlier in the video means all three of those things are more likely to happen. Isn't that weird? But let's get to it. So people talk about the value of a dollar a lot, and these days that usually includes lamenting how a dollar isn't really worth all that much. Things are expensive and they keep getting more expensive because the powers that be know we can't not have food or fuel or Netflix. But that doesn't mean that dollar is totally useless, and throughout history a single dollar has been enough to buy some pretty remarkable things. For example, number 10, Coke sold their bottling rights for $1. Coca-Cola sold about 25 bottles in its first year of operation and now sells about 1.9 billion bottles per day. That's billion with a B per day. Keep in mind that conservative estimates for the total population on planet Earth as of the writing of the article this video is based on was 8.045 billion. That means about 1 in 4 people buy a Coke every single day. In dollars and cents, the company makes about $45 billion per year. And with those big numbers floating around, it's kind of remarkable to learn that the rights to bottle the stuff was sold for a single dollar. Specifically back in 1888, Asa Candler bought the rights to the Coke formula, improved it, and began selling concentrated syrup. For a long while, Coke and most sodas were sold this way. The syrup would be mixed with soda water on site at a soda fountain in front of the customer. Candler was convinced this is how Coke should be enjoyed. And while he expanded the syrup production, a pair of lawyers approached him about the idea of just bottling the stuff and selling it that way. And Candler remained unconvinced that the idea was a good one and sold them the rights for a single dollar. A dollar he didn't even bother to collect. And I actually have an American dollar right here. I was going to use it as a prop, but I'm not sure how, because I like to have props for these videos, but a dollar's not exactly something you can just, I guess I could put there. That's a dollar right there. It's real. I've got a couple. I think I've got one signed. I thought this was my signed dollar, because I've got a dollar bill signed by like the guitarist from Dragon Force, because I met him at an event I was at, and I was like, the only thing I had for him to sign was the money in my pocket. I have like a £5 note, like an old style British one, signed by the Cheeky Girls, who were a really bad British pop band. I don't know why I've got those things. They're conversation starters, I guess. But moving on. Number 9, the patent for insulin was sold for $1. It's been argued that insulin has saved quite literally tens of millions of lives since its discovery. It's arguably one of the greatest medical advances in human history. Back in 1923, when Sir Frederick Banting discovered it, he understood the value and importance of the substance, but he also devoted so much of his life to it for a reason. He wanted to save lives. Because Banting was concerned with the value of insulin to society as a whole, rather than its value to him as an individual, he didn't sell it for a fortune or patent it to keep the secret for himself. He thought that a doctor profiting off a medicine would be unethical, being quoted as saying, "Insulin belongs to the world, not to me." Banting wouldn't even put his name on the patent for insulin. Instead, his two co-workers, James Collip and Charles Best, were issued the patent instead. Fortunately, like Banting, Collip and Best did not want to profit from the invention, so they sold the patent to the University of Toronto for a single dollar. Sadly, the altruism expressed by the creator of insulin hasn't made its way to the present day and the companies that sell it. And insulin is infamously very expensive, and my heart can only go out to Americans who have to deal with that. Number 8, Bombardier sold stake in one of their planes to a Boeing competitor for $1. And I'm thinking the word $1 is so fun to say. $1. So there's more drama in the world of jet manufacturing than you may realise. So to set the stage here, we know that Boeing, an American company, competes with Airbus, a European one, and Bombardier in Canada. All three technically compete with one another, but Canada and Europe teamed up to stick it to Boeing in a trade deal at least once. Bombardier made the C series of jets. The US Commerce Department backed Boeing by threatening the Canadian company with a 300% tariff, which would basically kill the ability to sell the jet. But Bombardier worked a deal with Airbus in which Airbus Airbus got a 50.01% stake in the C-Series production, and it only cost them the princely sum of $1. Why the great deal? Well, Airbus would assume the massive risk, and C-Series would be manufactured in Alabama as a means of skirting the 300% tariff. Since the jets would be produced in America, they didn't have to pay the tariff, you see. Eventually, the tariff ruling was overturned and Boeing didn't appeal, but Airbus did manage to take a larger stake in the jet's production, and Bombardier ended up dropping out entirely. But still, they stuck it to Boeing for $1. And you know what? That $1 was worth it. Number 7. James Cameron sold the rights to Terminator's script for $1. James Cameron has become a pretty iconic filmmaker over the years, with some of the most popular films ever made under his belt. This includes Titanic, Avatar, and the Terminator franchise. Terminator was the movie, though, that really put Cameron on the map back in the day, and it set the stage for everything that was to come. It also proved that nobody has as much faith in James Cameron as James Cameron. Cameron had only directed one movie prior to Terminator, Piranha 2: The Spawning. And if you haven't heard of it, it was not very popular, although it is kind of fun in that cheesy B-movie way. So I believe that's when James Cameron was working with B-movie auteur Roger Corman, who holds a special place in my heart as a lover of bad films. But getting back to Terminator, Cameron had not yet proved himself in the eyes of Hollywood by any means, but he was convinced that Terminator was a good idea. And more importantly, it'd be a good idea only if he directed it. So to convince the studio to let him take the reins for the film, he sold them the script for $1 on the condition he could direct it. Now keep in mind that studios liked the script and they offered big money for it. They just didn't want James Cameron to direct the film. So he rolled the dice and bet on himself. And despite the fact it worked out and Cameron has made 2 of the highest grossing films of all time, he still reportedly regrets the decision because he doesn't own the rights to Terminator anymore, I don't think. You know what, it's time for screw it. It's another bonus Karl fact here about Terminator. I love Terminator. Arnold Schwarzenegger wasn't meant to be the Terminator. In the original script, the Terminator was supposed to just look like a human because the idea was it can be anyone. It's supposed to look like an anonymous member of the crowd. And that was the idea. Like, you'd look at a crowd and one member of that crowd could be this robot from the future sent to kill you. And the original idea was to cast Lance Henriksen as the Terminator because he has a very average look about him. And the way that James Cameron pitched the film to studios is he walked in, talks about his idea for the film, and then Lance Henriksen would kick the door down wearing a leather jacket with like gold foil stuck to his face and a pair of sunglasses and sit in a chair and not talk. And that's how he got the movie, the movie funded. And the reason he got Arnold Schwarzenegger is because he wanted Arnold Schwarzenegger to play the hero. But then he realised as soon as he met Arnold Schwarzenegger, the idea of Lance Henriksen, even robotic Lance Henriksen, beating up Arnold Schwarzenegger is ridiculous. Arnold Schwarzenegger should be the Terminator. And when Arnold Schwarzenegger was talking to Cameron, like, I don't want to be a villain, Cameron assured him, like, this will be the role of your career. Like, I think the Terminator can be the role of like a lifetime, and it'll be one of the most memorable characters in fiction if you play them. And reportedly Cameron just spent their entire meeting sketching Arnold Schwarzenegger's face and just became just enamored with the look of his face and how like angular it was. And he sent Arnold Schwarzenegger a painting of himself where half of his face was robotic, and Arnold Schwarzenegger saw it, accepted the role on the spot. Fun, eh? Moving on. Number 6, Stephen King sells film rights for his short stories for $1. So if you add up all the movies, TV shows, short films, and anthology series based on Stephen King's works, you'll end up with close to 100 of them. People love adapting Stephen King stories to the screen, and sometimes the results are great. Sometimes not. King himself seems open to almost anyone and anyone trying their best though. So if you're a new filmmaker, like say a film student, and you want to buy the rights to one of his short stories, you can do so for the princely sum of $1. There are some strings attached and caveats, including that you have a year to do it, you can't distribute it without his permission, and you have to let Stephen King see it when it's done. I believe he also requests a copy and keeps the a library of the short films made on his works in his home. And it's worth noting that some filmmakers have gone on to big success by taking King up on this offer, perhaps the most noteworthy being Frank Darabont. Darabont, as you may recall, was the showrunner for the first season of The Walking Dead. He also directed The Green Mile, The Mist, and The Shawshank Redemption, all of which are based on Stephen King stories. God damn, do I love The Mist. The Mist is such a good film. Go watch The Mist. It didn't get its due and I hate it. Number 5. Houses in Detroit were going for $1 a piece around 2010. So if you know a little about Detroit, Michigan, it's that it used to be a hub of the automotive industry in America, and for a time the city was doing incredibly well until the industry shit the bed, and Detroit's entire economy tanked. The city had to file an $18 billion bankruptcy, and the population went from 2 million to 700,000, and unemployment skyrocketed. That huge population drop left many homes in Detroit empty, and there are entire streets and even neighborhoods that are still like ghost towns. The housing crisis made things even worse, and around 2010, houses were being practically given away. And the median price for a house around this time in Detroit was $25,200, and some houses could actually be purchased for under $100, with some going for the bargain basement price of $1. And were these $1 homes any good? No. Usable? Not really. Like many, horror movie props, they were burned out, broken and rotten, but there's land use and the potential to make something better out of it, and that was enough for some people. And it's not just Detroit that's tried to unload its trash properties either. St. Louis has also offered the $1 home program, though there have been some stricter rules about buying them, and there's similar things in small towns throughout Europe where they just have an aging population and no one really working there. So I believe there are a few places in Italy, for example, that sell you a house for a couple of dollars, and the caveat being that you have to live there and bring work and just that much needed youthful vitality to the area. There's similar schemes in Japan, I believe, where they have similarly aging populations in areas where just young people don't want to live. And you know what? It's time for another Karl bonus fact, because I remember during this period, you could actually buy an entire block of Detroit real estate for probably $100,000. And there was that plan to just buy an entire city block in Detroit and turn it into a giant paintball arena, which never came to fruition, but that would have been kind of cool. Number 4, the inventor of the chocolate chip cookie sold the recipe for $1. It's odd to think that pretty much every ubiquitous and commonplace food item we all know and love had to have been invented by someone at some point. Chocolate chip cookies, for instance, didn't officially exist until the 1930s. The recipe was first published by Ruth Graves Wakefield as Toll House Chocolate Crunch Cookies, named for the tourist lodge that was once a toll house that she and her husband owned. In 1939, she sold the rights to both the Toll House name and the cookie recipe to Nestle. Her price? $1. Rumor has it that she also got a lifetime supply of chocolate and did consulting work for Nestle for the next few years, which sweetened the deal in more ways than one. Also, they apparently neglected to actually hand over the single dollar bill. So, yeah. And a question a lot of people are probably wondering right now is, well, if they're not even collecting the dollar, why are they selling it for $1 instead of just giving it away? And that's just one of those weird quirks of the legal system. And that's because just giving something away is this weird legal quagmire that leaves you open to lawsuits and stuff if ownership is ever contested. Whereas just selling it for a token amount, say $1, means that you have paperwork that shows the thing officially changed hands. Because you can't write a receipt for $0. So as a result, it becomes a handshake deal, which is all well and good until someone changes their mind. For example, I actually have such a deal with the owners of TopTenz. My site, FactFiend, the logo for that was designed by the late owner of TopTenz, Shell Harris. And just many years ago, to avoid such a legal quagmire, I sent them $1 on PayPal and they sent me a receipt. So I owned the logo because they were worried that, it just means that everything's nice and safe and legal and above board. And I don't think they ever spent that $1. I never found out what they did with it. But moving on. Number 3, you can sell an Academy Award, but the Academy has the right to buy it first for $1. In the world of Hollywood, an Academy Award is the most prestigious prize you can win for some reason or another. Regardless of how it got that reputation, people still hold that little gold man in pretty high regard. Historically, of course, not everyone has cared about them. 3 people have even turned down their Academy Award. For those who choose to keep their Oscar and then just lose interest over the years, there may be the temptation to sell the thing. There is some bronze and gold in the statue, and its overall value is estimated to be around $400. Of course, an Oscar has value beyond what its base metals are worth. It's a symbolic thing, a collectible. For example, Orson Welles' Academy Award for Citizen Kane once sold at auction for over $860,000. In an effort to prevent the trading Oscars from continuing, the Academy has instituted a new rule that any recipient who wants to sell their award has to give the Academy first dibs to buy it at the price of $1. This even extends into death, so that if a family member inherits the award, they are bound by the same conditions, which seems legally questionable, but here we are. And it's time for some more Karl bonus facts about Oscars here. Marlon Brando very infamously did not really care for his Oscar. He used it as a doorstop to his bathroom for a couple of years, lost it, and then wrote a letter to the Academy asking for a new one. They turned him down. Kate Winslet keeps her Oscar for Titanic in her bathroom. And when she was asked why, that seems a bit disrespectful. It's your Oscar for winning. Surely it'd be pride of place in your home. She said, well, yeah, but when I do that, people get nervous about asking to touch it, because obviously people want to hold the Oscar. If I put it in my bathroom when they go to use the bathroom, like after they've washed their hands, hopefully, they can like pick up the Oscar, take some photos with it, pose in front of the mirror, and then they can do so without being embarrassed. Moving on. Number 2, DuPont built a nuclear site to produce plutonium in World War II for, you guessed it, $1. During World War II, America put the pedal to the proverbial metal to produce nuclear weapons, and the Manhattan Project was the program that oversaw it all. Knowing how to make a nuclear weapon is one thing, but building it is another thing entirely. The project needed facilities to handle just the sheer scale of the work. They enlisted the DuPont company for their expertise in building and operating large-scale manufacturing, despite the fact they were not a weapons manufacturer at all. DuPont had already been accused of making chemical weapons in World War I, and they eventually agreed to work on the reactor production and ended up being the main contractor for all plutonium work related to the project. But in an effort to escape the scrutiny they'd faced in the previous war, they set their price for helping at the sum of, you guessed it, $1. That way no one could accuse them of war profiteering, and instead recognize that they simply were doing so in a patriotic way. Speaking of, number 1, NPR bought the radio rights to Star Wars for $1. The Star Wars franchise, which includes movies, shows, books, merchandise, comics, video games, all that good stuff, has an estimated value of some $70 billion. It made George Lucas a very rich man, and it continues to make Disney even richer. But every so often, George Lucas proved that it wasn't always about making that money, like when it came to the Star Wars radio drama. Way back in 1983, NPR wanted to turn Star Wars into a radio drama. No one had really been doing radio drama since the 1950s, and they wanted to revive the format with something exciting, something with lasers in space. The USC Theatre program asked George Lucas for the rights to the movie, and Lucas, a graduate of the school and a fan of their NPR station, gave it to them for the price of $1. Mark Hamill even reprised his role, as did Anthony Daniels as C-3PO. They hired a novelist to adapt the highly visual movie into a radio drama and included entirely new scenes to flesh it out, since the actual movie only had about 30 minutes of dialogue and they were making 13 half-hour episodes. In 1983, they produced Empire Strikes Back, and then many years later, in 1996, they finally did Return of the Jedi 2. Each script was again purchased from George Lucas for $1. And I guess just one final bonus fact about, Star Wars and George Lucas. Like, similar to James Cameron, he made like a deal with the studio, which foregoed like some money. Specifically, he waived his director's fee for the movie in return for exclusive merchandising rights to Star Wars. Because at the time, like, movies were a thing. You made a movie, you released the movie, you made a new movie. No one gives a shit about the movie anymore, just who cares? And when he asked for the merchandising rights in return for waiving his director's fee, it's like, okay, so we don't pay you like $200,000 and you get the money made from selling a couple toys. Okay, great deal. And yeah, George Lucas made out like a bandit on that one. But that's a story for another day, and one I've actually covered on my own channel, Fact Fiend with Karl Smallwood. And you can find that link below. You can also find a link below my socials, the socials of the author, Ian Forty. And while you're down there, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And as I always like to say to the people who stick around to the very end, have the day you deserve. Cheers.